Up. 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 Reloading! Hello everybody, Prepper003 here today with another video for you, and this one is going to be a topic that I've already touched on in the past, but it's been requested that I retouch on it just because of the more popularity that they have gained in recent times, and also to touch on a little bit of the other topics, especially into the more full-size versions of them. But it's going to be PCCs, or pistol caliber carbines, and subguns for SHTF. Now, right now I'm going to start off with pretty much jumping right into it and starting off and saying that they are a very great general purpose firearm. For example, just here in Wisconsin, you are perfectly capable and legal to hunt with a subgun as long as it is classified as an ATF, by the ATF I should say, as a pistol, and as long as the overall barrel of the firearm is over 6 inches long. So this is perfectly capable of hunting and taking game. And now there are some Facebook groups that I follow that utilize the CZ for hunting purposes as well. The next thing is going to be for self-defense. Now the really nice thing about the pistol caliber carbine, especially in the subgun variant instead of the full size, is that they are very lightweight. They're very small and compact, so that you can easily use them in a self-defense situation for your home, for your family, especially if you have younger kids or maybe a more petite wife or something like that. You can easily have this be their usage of as a firearm, which is why I have this here, is for my wife to use as a home defense firearm, because it is a very light recoiling round. It's very small, so that even if you are a very small frame, you can get up on the pistol or on the rifle if you have it SBR'd, but you can still be able to perfectly wield this for self-defense in a home or in an SHTF scenario. The next point is going to be as a fighting firearm. Now I know I talked about defense, but you can also use this as a offensive weapon in case somebody comes and attacks your homestead post SHTF. Now sure, it doesn't have to be some doomsday like massive raid, but if you get attacked by a group of thugs that want your generator, that want your food you have growing, or that want your solar panels or whatever, you can have the capability of fighting against and defending yourself, or working offensively if they have already taken your family and are holding them hostage, and be able to capability of fighting against them and be having that nice low recoiling round and still being an effective fighting firearm. And the nice thing is that it's lightweight enough to where you can hold an extra bit amount of ammunition on you and be able to still be very mobile and be able to move around cover, move around vehicles, and so on and so forth, which makes it very good for a fighting purpose. The last point about the general purposes is that it's going to be a very good survival firearm. It's going to be able to take a lot of abuse from a lot of different elements, whether it be snow, whether it be water, with rain, whether it be mud, whether it be dirt, whether it be sand. It can take all of that and still keep on trucking, as a lot of other firearms, like you guys have seen if you watch my PTR torture test, might not always be up to the par with a full-size rifle. Now, I'm going to move on to just straight on to the next point, which is going to be they are very compact, which makes them very perfect as a bug-out vehicle gun, or as a truck gun, if you will. Now, what I mean by a bug-out vehicle firearm. So, if your main purpose is bugging out by a vehicle, having something for your driver, something that's very small, compact like this, especially if it has the capability of having a folding stock, you have a much quicker access to a firearm for self-defense, especially if you're caught up at a roadblock or you get ambushed and you have to quickly return fire. You can easily have this stored down by the seat and you have quick and easy access to it. So that's just one thing that's nice, and that's why you see a lot of members of the Secret Service, why you see a lot of members of certain security forces utilize pistol caliber carbines and subguns, similar to like this AR pistol here, in the form of SBR machine guns in their usage, but you can still see them using those shorter style firearms, and right now that's getting more and more shorter. Like you have for example, the Sig Sauer Rattler, that's something that's similar to this right here, but it's almost half the size. Another thing that makes this really nice about them being compact is that if you want to ever put a can on the end of them, that really cuts down on the overall length of having a fully suppressed firearm, especially if you're looking in terms of a full-sized rifle. Because that adds an extra, say you have your 16-inch barrel, now you're going to be putting on an extra 4 to 8 inches of suppressor on the end of it. That makes a pretty long rifle, as you can kind of tell with the two that I have sitting back here, as compared to this right here. The next point is going to be their reliability. I know I touched on it before with them, but being able to take some of the abuses of being a survival firearm. But the nice thing is that they can extensively take a lot of the abuse, as you're seeing right now, where they can be getting extensively exposed to sand and still be able to be picked up out of the sand and be able to fire those rounds reliably downrange and accurately. Then being exposed to a heavy amount of mud, being able to be picked up and still setting those rounds downrange and hitting the target, and even being exposed to dirt. So that's one of the things that's just nice about having these pistols here and having them be able to be quickly and actively used, especially in a survival situation, and still being reliable enough to be able to be relied upon in that situation where you might have to actually deal with it being exposed to mud, being able to experience it being exposed to adverse conditions, and you want to be able to know that you can trust this firearm to your life. So that's why I really like the idea that they are reliable. And I know some people had issues with the magazines of the CZ Scorpion, but the newer ones that are being produced post 2017 are perfectly reliable. I did drop tests on them. The one that I've had here has been pretty much loaded for the past year now, and it has been working perfectly fine. So that's pretty much what I just wanted to say with the lightweights and reliability of them. So now the next point that I'm going to touch upon is going to be the budget. Now, when it comes to the budget of the firearm, they can sometimes cost a little bit for the PDWs, so I'm going to touch upon that in the cons. But the nice thing about them is the actual round that they shoot. Most of them shoot the 9mm or the 45, sometimes a 10mm, but that is still massively cheaper than a 5.56 or a 308 for a main battle rifle or main fighting carbine. So the nice thing about that is that you can train with it very easily. You can go to a class and shoot 1,000 rounds without blowing $600. You can blow maybe a couple hundred on 9mm and still get that extra training that you want in time behind a rifle and get working around cover and everything else. The best thing about it, especially with that round, is being able to stockpile. Now, we all like to talk about how we stockpile a good amount of ammunition, maybe 500, maybe 1,000, maybe 1,500, 2,000 plus rounds of ammunition. Well, when you're talking about doing that in 5.56 and 308, that gets very costly. But when you look at that with a 9mm or a 45, that's not always the case. The next thing I'll mention, especially when it comes to the rounds and the budget, is that sometimes, especially if you are using a 9mm pistol, something similar to this Glock or this Beretta here, they are round compatible. So you're saving ammunition on there instead of having to buy two different caliber firearms, as if you were to be carrying a 5.56 and a 9mm for your sidearm. You're now having round compatibility between your main fighting rifle and your sidearm. So that's just another thing that comes into handy with choosing a PCC or a subgun for your sidearm. Sometimes even they do have the same magazine compatibility. If you were to get the magazine like the Glock compatible AR-9s, which shoot 9mm carbine. So that's just one of the things that's really nice about it, and being able to save on that budget by having magazine compatibility and round compatibility between your sidearm. The last thing is going to be that they are lightweight. And what I mean by lightweight, instead of it being compact, lightweight, they're two different topics in my kind of thought process. The nice thing about them being so lightweight is that you can easily have a full loadout and have the firearm itself and still be able to easily maneuver, run, move around cover, move around a vehicle without getting extenuated, especially if you're having to run and climb and everything else for a long period of time. they're not as cumbersome as a full-size firearm, which comes into a very good handy, especially if you're having to move and be about with a bug-out bag. So that's just one thing that I like about them being lightweight, is that you can even still manipulate them with your ruck on, as compared to moving around with a full-size rifle, which gets cumbersome, especially if you're trying to actually have to hold it the entire time. And if you're injured and you have only one hand, it becomes a little bit more difficult than if you were to have to deal with the subguns. Now we're going to get on to the cons of the issue. The biggest con that I know a lot of people are going to touch upon is going to be the overall cost. Now I know that a lot of the subguns, like the MP5s, just for example, can cost upwards of $1,500 and plus. So that's, especially when it comes to the magazines, where they're $60 a magazine for the MP5s, that gets into the overall cost too. So right now I do know that that is one thing that a lot of people don't like to talk about with the subguns, is that they don't like to buy them because of the overall extensive cost that goes into them, which I can agree upon. But with the Evo Scorpion here, this one right here I got for $6.99, which is a pretty good, okay price for a pretty nice and pretty definitely reliable subgun. The next thing is going to be the round. Now I do know that some people, especially those that want to think of it as a use of only as a fighting firearm, really hamper it because of the rounds that they use. For example, the 9mm cannot defeat a level 3 plus plate, and it can be stopped by a lot of the more basic body armor than a actual full-sized rifle can do. For example, if you were trying to fight against Op 4 that has a pretty much is equipped with standard police body armor that they scavenged off of fallen police officers or what have you, and they're using level 3A plates inside of their plates, or they're just using Kevlar, the 9mm might not pierce their vest as easily as using a 5.56 caliber would, and especially a full-length 5.56 caliber, which has the capability of having that extra bit of velocity, which sometimes can even pierce through level 3 plus plates. The last part is going to be one that I even knocked myself, and that's going to be parts. You aren't always going to, especially in an after or post SHTF scenario, you aren't going to be able to find all the parts, especially for the subgun categories as far as the pistol caliber ones. The parts are going to be very hard to find. They're not going to be as accessible as you would if you had a full-size firearm. Now the nice thing is you can get ones like the AR style ones, which you can find a lot of the compatibility for parts. You can find stocks, buffer tubes, lowers, and everything else, and kind of retrofit them to work with the magazines if you have some of the removable inserts for the mag well. But that's just one thing that I would say, if you are kind of generally pushing at it for a subgun purposely for SHTF, you might want to go with the AR style ones, just because they do have that ability to have the adaptability for parts and everything for the standard AR-15. But if you are to get one like I have here, which is the CZ Scorpion, me finding a lot for example, a replacement trigger module for this, like say for example, it gets just shot, for example, and the bullet went right through the trigger housing here, and right now it's plastic, there's no re-welding it or anything like that, it's shot, quite literally and figuratively. But the chances of me finding a new trigger module for this are very slim to none, as compared to, say for example, a round was to strike my trigger module or lower receiver here, I could easily find a replacement as long as I can replace the mag well insert for the mags to work with the new upper, or the new lower I should say. So that's pretty much my overall thought process on it. I really think that everyone, at least every prepper, especially if your main plan for an SHTF scenario is to bug out, should at least have one subgun for especially for a vehicle usage, just because they're so compact, you can have it stored in the seat there and be able to quickly get it up and into the fight, rather than having a full-size firearm. So that's just my kind of thought process on it. I want to really hear what you guys have to say. I know I've touched on the topic already in a previous video, but just due to the request that I've had to re-upload a new one and to kind of give a more in-depth thought process on it and kind of retouch upon it, especially now that it's become a much more popular option. So I want to hear if you guys actually integrate any subguns into your option as a SHTF firearm. What type of applications do you think it fulfills as a SHTF firearm for you and your group? Or if you think that it should just be kind of something that's like more of a novelty in thought and in usage than actually having a full-size firearm. So I want to hear what you guys have to say. I'm looking forward to reading through the comments again. And remember, those that prepare for today survive tomorrow. You guys have a great day.